Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar on circular design for next generation event and venue spaces. I'm Dr. Emma Abson, and on behalf of Trivandi Academy, Trivandi, and our wonderful partners Loughborough University, I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. I'm the senior academic at the Trivandi Academy, and the Trivandi Academy was launched about a year ago with the vision to drive the professionalisation of the major event industry. This vision came from Trivandi's experience of major events and their vast experience in that field, and our desire to share our knowledge and learning about the experiences that we've had and the work that we've done, and to support the development of the highly talented but sometimes quite inexperienced workforce. So we share our knowledge and our experience through our training and learning and development programs, through our e-learning courses, and through our really important collaborative partnerships, such as the one that we have with Loughborough. And Loughborough University are really a key partner for us due to their vast experience within the world of sports. So this university alliance that we're developing is a key aspect of the work that we do. And what we're trying to do when we work with our university partners is to bridge the gap between academic knowledge and industry application. And of course, this webinar today is a really key part of that. Before I hand you over to our wonderful host, I'm going to share a brief video from our chairman, Paul May, who will explain a bit about Trivandi's experience within major events and a bit more about our experience, particularly in venue design, architecture, and sustainability.
Hi everyone, my name's Paul May. I'm one of the founders and I'm the chairman of Trivandi. Just a little bit about me to start with. So back in the end of the 90s, I ended up working for Excel, which those of you who have been to London might know Excel as one of the big event spaces in the country and in the city. And actually it was my first exposure into the world of major events and big venues. And Excel is the epitome of a major event space that's designed for adaptation. It can host all sorts of things from exhibitions, conferences, and it was also one of the key host venues for the Olympic Games in 2012. But it really taught me a lot actually about thinking about adaptability and how you can actually really sweat a building, an asset, and make good use of it and really drive an efficient and sustainable outcome from a big piece of infrastructure like that. I was lucky enough to then work on the Olympics in London 2012, and I spent 7 years as the head of venue development, responsible for implementing the Olympic Games venue master plan. Now, a really interesting thing about that is that the master plan was, again, founded on sustainable principles. Previous games hadn't had such a focus on legacy, and the Olympic Games in London had a real thread of legacy running through the way in which the venues were planned and conceived, whereby there was planned for no white elephants, no venues after the games left there sitting empty. Legacy was at the heart of all of the planning. When I joined the Olympic Games, there was a really fantastic piece of work that had been done by the bid team, led by my business partner and our chief executive, James Bully. But actually, we really squeezed it further. So even over that 7-year period, what we inherited from the bid actually became more sustainable because we found ways of using existing venues or taking advantage of new developments that were coming on stream that we could actually use rather than building new venues without a proven sustained legacy. And it was really interesting to see that through. The consequence was the Olympic Park, which is a fantastic story of regeneration, but also actually the profile and the showcasing of a beautiful city like London and bringing to life iconic images like Horse Guards Parade or Greenwich Park or Wimbledon and established venues like that. And the purpose really of drawing attention to that is how if you really focused on long term, if you really apply sound, sustainable thinking into what you're doing, you can end up with something which has actually got really great longevity and which has a strong sustainability thread running all the way through it. So I've accelerated through to 2013, which is actually when we founded Trivandi. Myself and two colleagues who worked together on London 2012 came together and formed Trivandi at the beginning of 2013. And part of our motivation was how we took our learning from London 2012 and applied it to other big projects, whether they're Olympic Games, Commonwealth Games, World Cups for football, rugby, cricket, the Tour de France, World Expos, other big events. How do you actually drive our learning from a big project like London 2012 into other projects which have big venues programs in them, and where the potential for leaving an unproven legacy remains a real risk and a real challenge and a problem, particularly when there's a lot of money at stake. And so we've been doing that over the last 13 years, and we've grown our team over that period, and it's all focused on leaving behind that really strong legacy. The other things that are important to us are guest experience. So not just making sure that we leave behind something which has got long-term use, but actually making sure that it really factors in the needs of the people that are going to use it. And that in itself will drive operational efficiency, which in turn ends up with something which is really efficient and sustainable from a design point of view. And our brilliant team in Trivandi are all experts in those sort of things. You'll hear from them as part of the session today. And the thing that draws everybody in common within the Trivandi team is not just that they're brilliant professionals in their own right, but also that they're surrounded by experts who understand commerciality, understand operations, understand guest experience, take a long-term view, are informed by brilliant sustainable minds from companies like the Bulb, who are part of the Trivandi family, and use all of that multidisciplinary expertise to drive towards really tight, efficient, sustainable outcomes, which are informed by long-term thinking. And that's how we do what we do in a nutshell. I make it sound so simple when I describe it like that, but this is the essence of who we are. And hopefully what you'll find is our team brings some of that to life through the projects that we do. Projects for us include, major stadium projects like Premier League football stadiums, or international stadiums like Twickenham Rugby Stadium, for example, or big international stadiums in the Middle East or elsewhere, or venues that are being built for the Olympic Games in Brisbane or LA or wherever it might be, but also working on major events and doing the operational and guest experience planning and the strategic planning for a major event that can help to inform the way in which those venue plans come together. There are lots and lots of other venues which I could talk to you about forever, but I think I'll leave it there, and hope you enjoy the session. But thanks for your time.
Well, that was our chairman, and I hope that gives you a bit of an insight into who Trivandi are and what we do. And now I'm really delighted to hand over to our partner, Loughborough University, and on behalf of Loughborough University, Dr. Robert Schmidt. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Emma, and it's great to be here today. Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome from Loughborough University as well. As Emma said, I'm Rob. I'm a reader in architectural design and part of the School of Architecture, Building, and Civil Engineering. It's great to see so many people joining us today on a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about, and we're very much excited for our growing collaboration with Trivandi, both in research and in practice. It's a collaboration that cuts across the university, so not just the school that I'm based in, but I know there are colleagues here today from the business school, from the School of Sport, Exercise, and Health Sciences, as well as our estates and facilities management team. And then I want to thank Andy Moach from our side and his support of organizing today's event. Andy is a key point of contact for research and innovation in this area, and most of you will probably already be aware, but at Loughborough, we have quite a strong heritage and culture of sport, with a wide range of elite athletes and organizations that train here at our world-class facilities, including several partnerships with national governing bodies, but also with our exceptional research and academic programs that work with major brands and federations on sport innovations, and of course the experience and management of sporting events, from which we are very fortunate to be ranked first globally. And in a somewhat kind of parallel universe, the university also has a long heritage in design, which we recently built upon launching architecture at Loughborough nearly 10 years ago. In that time span, we very quickly have grown a strong reputation in architectural education, rising to the top of the league tables through our innovative approach, founded on the unification of theory and practice, talking about what Emma talked about that linking knowledge and application and the integration across broader disciplines, focused on a high quality learning experience. So in a way, from an institution's perspective, it was kind of a no-brainer to form a collective aim to bring these two strong trajectories together to shape a leading expertise in sports architecture. And today's presentations and conversations and our collaboration with Trivandi is one example of how we're beginning to do that. And then we're excited to do that. And so I am going to share my screen because this kind of brings me to introducing today's event or today's topic. And so hopefully everyone can see my screen. Today's event is Form Follows Future, so circular design for next-gen event spaces. And building off of Paul's intro with the Excel building as an example, but also the broader legacy of our sporting venues that do carry a significant economic, environmental, and social impact and lead to an important question through time and change. How do we continue to give new value to our existing assets? So I want to start with a very simple premise that we do adapt stuff all the time for our own needs, whether a bicycle frame becomes a lunchbox, a pencil becomes a hair tie, a hammer a doorstop, a napkin a bowl. We find creative ways to accommodate our needs. And that includes if we're hungry, right? As you can see from these two lovely ladies on the left here, humans are adaptable. But sometimes our needs are predictable. However, the challenge is most of the time our needs generally change in unpredictable ways. So we're trying to create, rather than come up with a specific solution, create a capacity for unforeseen changes. And I want to challenge us all and provoke us all today with regards to how we can see our buildings and how might we be able to adapt them, because we often don't see our buildings as adaptable. Here are a couple extreme examples which suggest we're only limited by our imagination. The image on the left of a baseball stadium in Osaka was set to be demolished and replaced by a shopping mall, but in the meantime served to showcase model homes, or the extension of an apartment or a flat in Russia with an airliner on the right. So, I think thinking about our buildings and then why do we actually demolish our buildings is an important kind of question as well. So this is a survey taken from a city in the US, analyzing all the buildings that were demolished over a year. What it shows that only about 30% were actually demolished because of their physical condition, structural or facade, for example. But actually, nearly 60% are demolished because of an incapacity to function under new demands, which to me suggests that there's this kind of scope for our buildings to last longer if we could accommodate change. And I want to sort of move to this very simple example that we're all kind of familiar with, the water bottle. So we're all familiar with this, but what is startling is that the difference between the use span of maybe 2 hours if we drink slow, and the lifespan, right, of maybe 700 years. And that's a dramatic gap between these two. And unfortunately, this is often true for many of the products that we produce, including our buildings. So one has to then begin to ask is how do we reduce this gap between the use span and the lifespan? And so over time, the reality is that we've created a world or society in which our lifestyles are inherently linked to the production of waste. We have constructed a disposable culture around throwaway living. But if we are to close this gap between use span and lifespan, then we need to rethink and revolutionize our relationship with stuff. And that is where this kind of circularity and circular economy kind of comes into this. And I believe, this is the underlying premise for today's chat, is this kind of idea, this kind of global value crisis in which we have to sort of think about this translation, discuss this translation between linear to circular. And this will be discussed in the presentations by Selina and thematically as she introduces the work that they've begun to do with part of the bulb. But also it will be carried through two very different case studies with Fiona and Liam's presentations to illustrate how the challenge transcends scale, context, and applications. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Selina, who is the director for the bulb, which is part of the Trivandi group. She has a substantial experience in events and event planning and is an award-winning leader focused on sustainability, social impact, and legacy planning. And Selina, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Rob. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And today, you should be able to see my screen okay? Yeah, I've got a head nod from Fiona, so that's great. So today I want to talk a little bit more about circular economy, building on what Rob just said. What we know is that the built environment accounts for 40% of our global carbon emissions. And when we think as a world and as a globe that we need to reduce this down by 50% by 2030, just 5 years away, less than 5 years, and by getting to net zero by 2050, this is a key area that we really need to focus on. It's not just about carbon emissions. The built environment takes 30% of global material use. It creates a third of the world's waste, and it uses 33% of the world's water. When we start to look at these stats side by side, we can really see the scale of what we need to change and transition in the industry. And we know that we're growing, we're building like at a rapid speed to accommodate growth, development, but also to accommodate a growing population. And so we know that annual global extraction of materials is set to triple by 2050. But then when we take that down a notch and look at even inside the buildings, it's estimated that 22 million pieces of furniture are thrown away every year in the UK alone. That's just in the UK. When we think about the rest of the world, that is huge. And that's a huge amount of furniture that can be reused. And a fit out project, which is a project that we at the Bulb and Trivandi work on a lot, and an example I'm going to share with you, can generate more than 5 tons of waste for every square meter of floor space. So we can see from this that we really have to transition the industry. We need to start thinking in a more circular approach. Thinking about how we start from the very beginning. How do we design buildings, infrastructure, so that we're thinking with the end in mind? I always tell my clients, start at the end. Think about what this material is going to be when we've finished using it. Where is it going to live? How is it going to be once its value in this particular project or building has been done? And how do we make sure that it stays a resource rather than becoming landfill in the environment? We think about optimization, how we can use technology like 3D printing, which reduces waste, innovations, thinking about where are we producing the material, the asset? Is it local? Are we using local suppliers? How do we reduce transportation emissions by only using local suppliers? How do we utilize manufacturing factories that have got clean energy, low water usage, zero waste? But most of all, how do we build out these systems so that we're always thinking about reuse, about the life at the end, about stewardship, about and also preempting legislation around circular economy, so that we can really demonstrate that we're thinking about the future of everything we're doing. And this is set to really be a game changer. A circular economy approach could reduce building global emissions by 38%. By thinking about reusing materials or reusing recycled materials, bio-based materials, designing out waste so that we're not generating a lot of cut-offs or creating things that we just don't need. We're reducing the demand for steel, aluminium, cement, and plastic, which are some of the most carbon intensive materials that we can use. So 4 of the design principles that we utilize, and these align with the World Green Building Council, is first of all, building only what you need, thinking about efficiencies, but not building things that just don't need to be there. Building with low impact materials, and we're going to come on to that and look at that for the rest of this session. Designing and building efficiently. So thinking about energy, water, transportation, designing out waste. How do we build likewise very efficiently? Thinking about even where our crew are coming from to build. And then designing and building for that long-term value. Today, I really want to focus on low impact materials. I think materials are one of the most visible and impactful ways that we can demonstrate sustainability, stewardship, and create a narrative and speaking point about the building, the infrastructure that we're creating. Using certain materials, we can really demonstrate the values of an organization, their approach to how they manage resources, how they're thinking about a legacy, how they want to increase the expectations of consumers and attendees and even their own staff. It really gives a talking point for an organization to demonstrate those values. So when we're thinking about low impact materials, these are some of the things, and not all, but some of the things that we should be considering. Using a really hyper-local supply chain from where it's manufactured to where it's used. How can you center everything in a certain radius so you're minimizing transport emissions? And also giving back to local economy. Thinking about the percentage of the content, how much of the content of that material is recycled, bio-based, renewable. Thinking about how maybe you can put in place a target to have 50% of all materials are generated from recycled content. Thinking about the low embodied carbon of the material, and I'm going to touch on this next. Do they have certifications? Cradle to Cradle is a great one that looks at the embodied carbon of the material from extraction all the way through to when it's used. Other materials that are really centered in that materials industry. So if it's wood, FSC, thinking about green steel, thinking about responsible extraction, human rights, health and safety, and the social impact, just as what I said. And it's incredibly important that we start to track and set targets around material use and that we collect data through concepts like material passports, which again, I'm going to touch on. So when we say embodied carbon, this means the total amount of carbon generated from when we extract the raw materials, all of the transportation, the manufacturing, the construction, the installation, even when it's demolished, if the material's demolished and what happens to it after. It tracks the entire life cycle of that material and tracks and analyzes and reports on the carbon generated at every step of its life. This is a really important way of owning responsibility for the materials that you use. It means that we're looking at and thinking about our impact at every step of the way, rather than just inside the building or at the point of construction. It's incredibly important to think about where materials have come from, how they've been made, what happens to them during construction, and what happens to them after. And through tracking embodied carbon, and what we want to aim for is materials that have got low embodied carbon. It means that if we're looking for suppliers that can align with us and provide materials with low embodied carbon, that we're really contributing and supporting to that circular model. It means that at every step of the way, your material has considered the energy it uses, the water, the transportation, and it also has an onward life plan. It usually means that the materials has recycled or bio-based materials that have been integrated into it. And it can absolutely support any sustainability certification and benchmarking. So talking to suppliers and thinking about asking them, what is the embodied carbon of this material, is a really important step towards taking more responsibility for material use. The Paris Olympics, I'm sure most people on this call know that the sustainability of the games was incredible. A huge reduction in carbon compared to previous games. And that was through using 95% of existing infrastructure. The one building, I think one of the buildings that they did build was the aquatic centre. And they ran it the aquatic centre runs completely on solar power. It uses bio-based building materials and it's fitted out with recycled materials. So at every step of the planning, construction, build and use operations of this building, the embodied carbon has been considered. And it's a really incredible case study to really look deeper into. But when we think about recycled materials and building materials, I wanted to share some of the materials that I've seen that I think will become the future. These are currently materials that are being innovated and being tested out on a smaller scale. But I think if these are scaled up and can match demand, it is going to be incredibly exciting for the construction industry. And this is one area that I completely geek out on. I love materials. So when we look at biomimetic design, this is where we emulate nature's designs, processes, ecosystems. And there's two materials in particular which are incredibly exciting. And one is mycelium, which is fungi, the roots of fungi, dried out, processed, and it becomes strong enough to build with. It's fire and water resistant, so it makes a really great building material. You can see here a building made from mycelium. It's also used in certain situations for insulation rather than other plastic-based materials. And then also you can see the burger there. This is a burger box made from seaweed. It's an incredible packaging innovation from a company based in the UK called Nopla. They are partnered with Just Eat and are rolling out this seaweed packaging, which composts in 6 weeks. So when, I think about Rob's slide about the water bottle that's used for 2 hours and exists for 700 years, when we think about all the plastic that our takeaways come in, it's exactly the same, except the use time is a lot less. So being able to transition over to seaweed and thinking about things like mycelium are incredibly important when we think about building and about the operations of our buildings as well. Bacteria, maybe not something that everyone on this call has even considered, but bacteria actually is a carbon sequester, and innovations are happening around bacteria being built into manufacturing to form materials that can regenerate and absorb carbon at the same time. So the concrete you can see here is actually a living concrete. It's had bacteria injected into the concrete mix. And when it creates a stress crack or a hairline crack, the bacteria activates and actually self-repairs. It's incredible. It's like magic. And so it means that those hairline cracks don't turn into something bigger, which then require rebuilding or huge amount of works that require the use of more concrete or other materials. It means that we can cut that out completely. When this is rolled across all materials, all buildings, it's going to be a real game changer for keeping buildings in use for a lot longer. And then carbon capture materials. This is so exciting. This is bioplastics made from carbon capture technology, or materials made from bioplastics, which are created from farm waste, and they sequester carbon from the atmosphere. So what you can see here is an Audi garage in Berlin, and it's been wrapped in a product from a company called Made of Air, and it sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. This building wrap is made up of 90% carbon, and at the moment it's stored 2 tons of carbon. It's an incredible technology. It looks great as well. And if we start to wrap buildings in this, it means that buildings are starting to pull carbon from the atmosphere. And then materials that are actually using solar, wind, and hydroelectric systems to power, or they're harvesting water. So this solar pavilion cloth, it's a cloth that's made from solar panels that harvests heat and can be used across the side of buildings or in F&B stands. It can also be branded. This is a Dutch company. And then this flexible paving system, which keeps water inside it so that it can actually water trees, and it helps mitigate water management challenges, particularly in flooding situations. These are all ways that we use material, that we think about almost giving materials that we're using a second job. It's not just a material to look good or to walk on, but it's actually doing something else to help ensure that that material lasts longer, that it solves another challenge that we might have. this is a really exciting way to think about materials. I've even seen a laptop that's got a solar panel on the top so that it powers itself, which I'm sure we can all agree would be really needed. I don't know how many times I've been caught out with my laptop going to red. And I just want to share this project that we at the Bulb worked on a couple of years ago, which is the Verizon London Hub. Verizon are a huge tech company, mainly in the US, but getting bigger in the UK. And they created their first London hub, which was a place to showcase technology and host their guests, showcase what they do as a company. We worked with the architects and the construction company to ensure that this whole space was built with the circular economy in mind. So first of all, the place that we took over, all of the furniture and the existing infrastructure inside the building, we made sure had a responsible second life, working with different recycling companies across London. We made curtains from Stitched, a Yorkshire zero waste female-owned mill. The coffee tables were made from cork. The sofas were made from sequel yarn, which is an ocean plastic. All of the flooring was reclaimed from the previous hub that was based there. But one of the big things that we did was work with a local London artist, and all of the meeting room tables were made from recycled e-waste, which obviously it solved a problem. It got rid of some e-waste, but it also generated a talking point for everyone that was coming to sit and have a meeting with Verizon. You can see that we've got a sign that we inputted in there. You can also see some more. These are the sequel sofas, all of the cork tables, and then the wall panelings were made from discarded London plastic pollution from a company called Smile, which are based in Hackney. Every single supplier and material that we used was made in the UK and came from the UK. So we were able to keep the embodied carbon as low as possible. We've got a digital version of the whole of this journey and story that we did behind this. So if you'd like a copy of that report, please do feel free to reach out. The final thing that I want to share is material passports. For me, this is one of the most exciting developments in material use and in construction. This is a digital product passport that stores vital information on every material. It stores its carbon and environmental impact. It stores where it's come from, how it's got to the next stage, all of its health and safety, fire resistance, water, the warranties, certifications, how to care for this material, and then most of all, what you can do with it next. What are the properties of this material which enable you to understand how you can use it in its next life? And this is incredibly important because it provides data transparency. I've been caught out so many times on a material being marketed as a sustainable material, and when it arrives, it's very clear that it's not. It means that we can actually look online in a central database like a platform like Circuland, which is a new platform and stores material passports, as well as an access to a general materials database. So a really amazing new platform that people should be using in construction, building, design. But going back to material passports, it also enables us to understand how we can reuse materials. What are the next stages for each material? How can we get more value and return on investment? It allows us to understand our embodied carbon emissions, and it also gives us data to start to think about how we improve materials for future use. If we're tracking materials all the way through their life, start to look at that data. It gives us the power and the insights to think next time, I'll do it this way. So a really, really important innovation for people to start thinking about for their venues, for construction and design. And there is one building at the moment, and this is a really great opportunity for everyone, all of our global client base and everyone on the call to get ahead of the curve on this. The Edenica, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, building is under construction at the moment in London. It's the first building in London to have a material passport. It's tracked every single material that's used in the construction of this building, with the aim that all of that is held in a storage bank, and that the operators and the owners of the building can then understand how to care for the building, how to do upgrades, but also when the building does come to upgrades, how to reuse and ensure that all of the materials have a responsible onward life. This building, it enables all of these materials to be used as a resource continuously instead of going into waste. And it really sets an incredible and exciting standard for the construction industry to be more responsible, and to look at how we create a standardized process where we understand the impact of everything that we're building at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Selina. I think the plan is maybe we'll do questions at the end. I think that's the plan. I'll jump into one of our case studies then. So I'll share my screen as well. And thank you both for the great start as well. So bear with me 1 second. And is everybody able to see my screen? It should be loading just now. Brilliant. Okay, so just quickly kind of wanted to run through one of the case studies we've been working on. So going from the materiality and in-depth to that to back to one of the other points Selina raised, which is actually that use of the building, and also thinking about how we can adapt different buildings, in this case an existing building we all might be familiar of. So it's Piccadilly Lights, and it's this building here. So actually we weren't doing anything with the screen. So as you know, Piccadilly Lights sits at the junction of Regent Street and Piccadilly. You've got Shaftesbury and the West End, the theatres as well in the area. So it is a highly congested site, quite constrained in terms of pedestrians and traffic and things. And we were actually working with the client on this lower left-hand unit next to Boots. And what we were looking at, so I'll go into giving you an idea of what the space originally looked like. This is some photos of the existing site. So this is taken at ground floor, and that's standing at the entrance looking in, and then further into the space here and looking back out onto Piccadilly Circus itself. So you can see here the existing staircase takes up quite a large space. There was existing kind of drop ceilings and partitions, and sort of slightly out of date materiality. And the client wanted to turn this retail and banking space, of different uses there, but it was quite restrictive in how it was being used, and certainly only had one purpose. It couldn't really be adapted for the future plans of the client. So we then were brought in to look at the whole building. So you can see here, it's got the ground floor and that existing staircase. We've got the basement here, and we also have a mezzanine level at ground floor as well. Really high ceilings, great depth of space as well. And you've got the Piccadilly screen on the outside of the building there. So as part of the wider picture, it wasn't just about this unit. It wasn't just about adapting and changing this existing building, but also fitting into the wider plans of the site that the client has ambitions for. We've got numerous retail buildings at the back of the site. We've got restaurants at ground floor to the, I think, west of the site, and just quite a large quadrant of building work going on. So the first initial brief was, how can we take this building and adapt it to lots of different use as an individual building, but also looking ahead, looking at how the leases, the timescales of the leases of the different retail units around it can be adapted as well. So in the next 5 years, 10 years, you know, this building will be able to operate as part of the wider site. So first thing I'll talk about, to create a space that can be sort of easily modified and adapted to suit various event types, to enable kind of efficiency of the space, and also to be cost effective as a cost effective use of the space. And in that way, the venue can stay relevant over time. So how do we do this? And the first thing, I'll go back to the existing photos there. The first thing we can do is look to make the space open, and giving you the hero shot here. But we wanted to create a completely open space that could be used and be quite flexible in how different brands wanted to use it. And that would allow you know, as many different types of brands and as many different types of events to have time here and really kind of create a blank canvas that can be modified however each person needed to use it. So the first one, as I said, was open space there. And as you can see, you've got the screen there. So the next step we do is integrated technology. And we've got some drawings here which show what that big screen actually consisted of. This is a section taking through the existing wall. And we worked with Digital Media Technologies who have produced this screen. And the screen is made up of all these individual cassettes. And they kind of plug into an existing structure, and we actually integrated aspects for their mechanical and electrical sort of equipment as part of that screen, and then also the speakers to the side, and then it's the coordination piece between the mechanical and electrical, so the air vents and things as well. So that was the hero shot here, hero screen, sorry, on the left hand side of the ground floor, and that's actually wraps round into this corner screen as well. And really that allows brands to come in and they can play anything they want on that screen. It's huge. We're talking 14 meters in length and 3 meters high. So really it's that wow factor that brands can use and really sell and market their idea and get that initial kind of immersive experience from a guest experience point of view. The second aspect of it was, you can see a plan here on the ground floor, but we had a balustrade up for the mezzanine, and the client was keen to integrate a digital screen within the balustrade itself, balustrade detail, and that was quite a nice little piece of integrating that technology within that balustrade. So we took the mezzanine structure and we had the drivers as part of the screen actually sitting below the, if you like, the cassette that held the glazing in place. Louvers on the front there, you can see a test piece. We did a mock-up prototype where this bit, obviously the structure for the glazing is here, and then we've got the louvers, which we were allowed to, you know, we put LED lighting in, so again it all fed into that sort of brand experience, and we had the louvers were able to come off to be able to access the drivers from a maintenance point of view for the screen. So what that looked like, and then you can see the welcome to below the lights. So it's this digital mesh. It is you can see through it as well, which is an extra cool piece about it, but literally millimeters thick added onto the glass balustrade, and you can see here the louvers and the drivers are all hidden below, integrated within the structure there. The other aspect of the integrated technology piece, and just thinking about how we can bring, sort of drive additional revenue for the client, but also keep the space as adaptive and flexible as possible, is to have projection mapping. So in the basement, only a small portion was given over to the LED screens, and the rest of the space was essentially left blank. And the reason for that is we can have, as you can see here on the right, an example of projection mapping. So they've got 8 projectors proposed. And what that allows is an immersive experience, interactive experience, where people can come in, you can press on walls, you can stamp on things on your feet, and then it is then projected onto the space around you with sound effects as well, and the colour. And there's a lot of these kinds of spaces going on in and around London, or across the UK actually at the moment. But what it means is that brands can come in and they can choose the different rooms depending on how they want to use the venue. They can have the LED screens if they want to, or they can have something more immersive and interactive. And again, it's just thinking about how different brands may want to use the space differently. And that means from a commercial point of view, it makes the space more versatile from the client's perspective. Then moving quickly through to material palettes, and Selina's gone into this quite a lot of detail, so I'll keep this short. But it was really important looking at that existing structural staircase. The staircase itself was a massive part of the structure. It's one of those things that obviously it's a key element of the building. It's very, very hefty to start changing a lot of the structure. So we tried to work with what there was as the existing materials and the existing staircase. And what this meant was taking the stone staircase, but we wanted to, the stone tiles on the staircase, we wanted to make that more relevant to the branding and the design of the space. It was very monochrome, and the staircase kind of stood out like a sore thumb, unfortunately. So we were able to cover the existing staircase with simply plywood and mechanically fix some new tiles to the staircase. And you can see here these photos are of us testing an LED strip to light the stairs with a new nose tread and those new tiles, and then smaller details to see how we might be able to hide the cabling for the LEDs on the stairs. And you can see here, if you remember the existing picture I started with, it now absolutely looks like part of the wider space. And the LED lighting to the nose treads were very discreet. And instead of changing the handrails and the glazing, we simply were able to put a vinyl wrap over them, filled in the gaps with individual pieces, so it looked more uniform for the curved balustrade there, and we could repurpose the existing balustrade. Where we infilled part of the floor, we were able to add this new balustrade around, metal balustrade going round, so it all sort of looks as though it was all meant to be. And one example of really just not necessarily sort of demolishing something, but adding to something, even though it's adapting the whole space and changing the whole design of the space. And some more photos here, just looking at the smaller details of those. You can see the tiled floor there, tiled staircase there, and the vinyl wrap. One of the more fun parts of this project were, believe it or not, the toilets. So thinking of branding, it wasn't just about the brands and the events that were coming into the space, but it was also about paying sort of an honour to the original client, and obviously Piccadilly Circus, and Piccadilly Circus, with being in the location it is, with the heritage and the history of the West End and the theatres. We took the words actually that came from the words on the screen here came from the branding. So it was, being iconic means to taking something big, some big brave steps, and daring to be different. So we then thought, rather than having the monochrome spaces throughout the rest of the building, we could just apply some of the fun creative aspects to the toilets here. So you've got the red, the Piccadilly red and Piccadilly blue. So the women's toilets were blue and the men's toilets were this pinky red tile and red walls. And again, it was just an example of picking something that was going to be super wearable. The constant thought was, how do we make something that is fun and creative, but you're going to get hundreds of people using this space. We created these metal shrouds at the back of the basins so that people weren't standing on pipes, weren't able to pull wash basins off the wall, for example. Lighting was set, it was a very fun type of lighting, but it was set high enough so people weren't touching it and damaging it, for example. So you can still have robust spaces designed for lots of people's in venues, but it's these key considerations that we're trying to think of in terms of making sure they're safe as well. Lastly, I'm just conscious of time as well, so move on to movable partitions. And one of the key elements is obviously the space is huge structural elements to the ceiling, and the space is, as I said at the start, quite a deep space, but we do get brands and companies who come in and say, well, we don't need the whole space. So one of the designs was to actually introduce these movable hanger doors. And what that allows is smaller event spaces on the ground floor where people can come in and obviously pull these doors across and have a much more intimate event, or retail pop-up shop, for example. They can still use the hero screen on the left, but also the doors within the doors allow kind of a backstage area and then a back of house and a front of house setup as well. So it's keeping that adaptability in mind. And just to wrap up then, so here are some examples of how the space has been used since it was opened. So we have Williams F1 used the space right before, just right at practical completion. So you can see the number of people coming in. It does get really, really busy. We've got McVitie's using the space as well. So different pop-ups of retail ideas. You can see how they can utilize both the hero screen and also the screen on the balustrade. We've got L'Oreal here as well, and the Premier League using the space.
Great set of presentations that exemplify the thinking and practice around circularity and adaptable design for event spaces, and giving us some interesting food for thought in terms of as we kind of contextualize long-term thinking and value in our own work. And I always think it's important that when we have this opportunity to have these discussions, that we don't kind of contextualize it outside of our own what we do, but to make sure that we kind of bring it into what we do in our everyday kind of practices. And I think that's where we can make the biggest difference in thinking about that. And so I appreciate we're over time, but I do want to give a chance to maybe ask one question of each presenter to sort of just maybe start and provoke a bit of a conversation, which hopefully can be continued offline or through other channels, or maybe we'll have another event that we can continue the discussion. But I think I'll just kind of jump around a little bit, and I think I'll start with you, Fiona, because I think it's interesting to look at an existing building, having to work with an existing building as a kind of initial starting point. And that often gets characterized as being much more difficult than having a fresh start or building new. I'm just curious, were there any particular constraints, or for that matter, opportunities that you found working with the existing building that you had to navigate as part of that process, and how did you solve or take advantage of those as part of that?
Thanks, Rob. So yes, very, very good question. I think building in central London is never easy anyway. In the case of Piccadilly, it was particularly, the site was particularly constrained. It's just, there's numerous kind of aspects. I think what, touching on what Liam said as well, obviously you get the constraints and issues with both new builds and working with existing. But for me, I agree that even though they each come with their own set of challenges, I do think working with the existing buildings is more challenging, just due to the number of constraints and also the amount of potential unknowns. So especially if the building has already been adapted over time. And with Piccadilly, as I said, that unit is part of the wider building, and the screen, obviously the screen is a heritage piece, if you like, but we're also talking about sort of nearly 800 square meters of vertical real estate. Essentially, that's bigger than a tennis court, and it's on that steel frame, and you've got the retail units out the back, and also it's on the junction of Regent Street and Piccadilly. So just from a site point of view, you've got limited access, and the logistics of getting to the site, it's a high traffic area, it makes for construction vehicles and materials very, very difficult. And one of the ways we had to look at how it was done was a lot of the deliveries of the materials had to be done overnight, just because then it's safer for you're not having to deal with pedestrians, and also the high volume of traffic in the area. And then more to that point, you have traffic and noise restrictions as well. All your construction activities have to adhere to those strict kind of regulations, just to minimize that disruption to pedestrians' vehicles. So when you start working with an existing site, such as Piccadilly, you're also having to take into the context, and that shapes your sequencing of work, and just how the program timeframe kind of comes together. And I think one of the crucial things as well for Piccadilly is that heritage point. So Piccadilly Circus, all the surrounding buildings are historically significant, and it was clear with this particular project, one of the more beautiful parts of it was that I'd say the palimpsest of work over time. You get these layers of people adding to the building and taking away from the building, and you've got Boots next door, which used to be separate units, and now it's taking over the first floor. So the staircase itself actually doesn't go anywhere anymore because Boots used the first floor. So the first thing we walked into, and when we took the ceiling down, you realize, as one of those unknowns, the whole patchwork across the ceiling of different materials added and taken away, and it really did create this kind of mishmash of everything on the ceiling. But rather than strip it out and take it away or cover it up again, we thought, well, that's a nice opportunity to tell the story of the site itself, and work with that. So the ceiling became black to even it all out, but we were able to sort of look at the huge structural beams that went across the space, and that set out a really nice datum line. You can see, despite the ceiling in some of the photos I showed, despite the ceiling being very, very dense with mechanical and electrical equipment and, you know, sprinkler systems and things like that, it created this beautiful datum line that we could fit everything neatly within the kind of the coffers, if you like, between the structural beams. And that really added to the overall aesthetic. So I could go on, but I think I'll stop there. But yeah, I think definitely working with existing buildings brings a lot of challenges, but yeah, lots of good opportunities as well.
I think it's your last little bit there was really interesting in the sense that, like, it connects, to me at least, to Liam's point about trying to build off the existing place, the sense of place, right, and trying to operationalize, whether that might be the atmosphere, whether that might be these different other materials or components. And I think it's a really important part about how we build connections between, you know, people, their users, and the building, the architecture, and the built environment. And I think I will transition that to Selina, if that's okay, because as part of my design lab, we're testing a wide range of scenarios to repurpose waste materials or perceived waste materials, in particular across different industries. And I'm just curious to know, it was fantastic to see all the different examples of future materials. But have you, in your experience in practice, have you seen a rise in the use of discarded or reused materials in projects? Obviously, you've shown the Verizon Hub, which was a fantastic project. But I think more generally, you know, is there a general change in how the industry is approaching material choices and the use of materials like reused materials?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's becoming something that people want to see. And it creates that amazing narrative and talking piece, as I said. But last year we worked on a huge show that's in Dubai to celebrate the United Arab Emirates National Day. And we used a wood that's called desert board, that's made from discarded date palm wood. And it's created locally in the UAE. It's almost like an MDF type wood, but it's all natural and made from discarded date palms. Equally, we also created retail units out of a kind of pressed material that is made from discarded date seeds. So you can really see how suppliers are seeing waste now as actually a resource. Like, how do we use this leftover material to actually create something that generates revenue, generates great stories for the region and for the company, and then also generates great story for the client. So I think for me, that's such an exciting way to use waste. And I think in the future, the next generation are going to be completely astounded by the fact we used to throw away so much material and not use it. And I think moving forward, all materials will be thought about as an opportunity rather than something to just get rid of.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important, and the reality of, you know, it's so simple. The single difference between really a resource and waste is just value that we put on it, right? And so it's just thinking about these opportunities in which we can create new value is such an important thing. And I think it's fantastic to hear that that's becoming a selling point rather than a constraint or a hassle, let's say. Which it has been in the past, right? In terms of what to do with this, or like timber offcuts or waste offcuts at site. But now it seems that it's changing, which is great.
Yeah, it solves the challenge on every single part of the process, you know, rather than generating landfill where we're using it for something else. So it just makes sense, and it needs that transition brain set.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So thank you. And I'm going to, I believe, Jane, you have your hand up, but I don't know if we're able to actually get you to speak or not, or I don't know if we have that capability, Emma, or if she can ask the question directly. I would like
Jane
to.
can ask, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was really interesting. I am the chair of a festival here in Edinburgh, and we every year take over an unused space in the city, so an unused building. So this year we're in an old paper factory which hasn't been used for quite a few years. So we completely renovate the building so that it's fit for purpose in terms of delivering a 5-day festival, which spans like visual art, music, spoken word. So it's a massive undertaking, and we have like a whole team of volunteers that help us do that, as well as working with obviously event designers, etc. But we have like zero budget. I mean, we have like a really, really limited budget. So a lot of what you're saying is brilliant, but we're talking about, you know, huge, huge budgets here, which a lot of festivals is just completely, particularly arts festivals, it's quite inaccessible. So obviously we want to build as sustainably as possible, and we do a lot of reuse and recycling. But I just wondered, in terms of advice to festivals and smaller arts organisations who just don't have these sort of budgets, in terms of how they can use sustainable principles in their building design.
Thank you, Jane. I think it's an interesting question and always a challenge in terms of any project in a way, but particularly when you have limited resources. Does anybody want to respond to Jane's question?
I'm conscious that I've spoken. I don't know, Liam, do you want to jump in on that one, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, I could come in on that one. So I'm working at the moment with a festival ground in the UAE, and we're going through an exercise at the moment, Jane, where we're looking at really helping them for the future to identify what they bring in as overlay, so as temporary stuff, and what they could provide permanent. And it's always a really fine balancing act, because there's certain things they use year after year, which they want to be able to invest in, but the capex cost of buying that piece of kit is high. I think when I was back in my university days, we used to, as part of our end of year show, we used to reach out to suppliers to look to see if there was offcuts from or leftover materials from construction sites. And there are a number of companies now. There's a Belgian company called Rota who take materials. They basically deconstruct buildings in advance of contractors going in and ripping it all out, and they take care of it. And there are some companies in the UK who are doing that as well. So there are definitely avenues to explore. I think the first thing is balancing out what's overlay and what's permanent, and getting that in a spreadsheet and seeing what are the right things to invest in, and that might be short term or long term. But then I think there definitely are opportunities to work with contractors or developers to see if there are materials that you can reuse or give a second life to. There are challenges around that, no doubt, with things like fixings and cleaning them up and making them fit for reuse again. But it's something that's happening. I think, Selina, you know it's happening too, and it's really exciting to see, because it gives us like something to work with, and such an exciting potential, to reimagine what a material could be, and to adapt it for a new purpose is such it's a pleasure really to be able to do that.
Definitely. And Jane, I think the other thing that I would be looking at as well is your operations, and just taking a moment to do an analysis of where your biggest waste is, and maybe a cross-reference that with cost, and where we can start to look at efficiencies. So, there are ways of looking at kind of everything from your F&B to your serveware to, the energy you're using, the amount of suppliers coming on site. I don't know if you've already done anything like a carbon footprint, but one of the best things that I find to be useful is to measure the carbon footprint of everything, and also look at that in an analysis across against your finances as well, against your P&L, and be able to see the biggest footprint, the biggest costs, and start to look at how you can explore different changes and efficiencies to be made.
Yeah, thank you, Selina.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Rob.
No, thank you, Selina, and thank you, Liam. I think I'm going to take the opportunity that, since Liam sort of responded to that question, to wrap up for today. It means that, Liam, you get to escape my challenging question that I had for you. You're very lucky for that Jane asked her question. But I'm going to turn it over.
You can ask me afterwards, Rob.
Yeah, I'll hit you up. Don't worry. And
okay, good.
I want to thank everybody on behalf of Loughborough University for participating today, and I want to thank Fiona, Selina, Liam, and Emma for their support and their great presentations today. And I'm going to turn it over back to Emma to wrap up as well. Thank you.
Yeah, not much from me. You'll be pleased to hear. I don't have as many insightful things to share as everybody on this call did. What a great session. I just want to thank Rob and all your colleagues at Loughborough for all your support in getting this webinar going. And I think there's so much to say, as we can tell by having to run over by a few minutes here. And I would really hope we can all get together again and have continuing the conversations. But Rob, thank you for your brilliant hosting today, and thanks for the panel and for everybody attending. And I think we'll close it there. Thank you very much.